in the temple doing what? Asking questions and answering questions. So at 12, you've got this great education already. How can these things be? That was a marvel too, was it not? They were astonished. So an example that these individuals are setting is also something to this. How can they speak so boldly? How can they do these things? Where are they getting this education? Two things I want to keep in mind. First off, what kind of an example do you think that they were setting before others with their boldness?
They're being unafraid, that they're not have no inhibitions about speaking the truth. There's some people that, because of their surroundings and environment, are afraid to say anything because of what might happen.
Yeah, this is a far cry from Peter. Peter before had denied Jesus those 3 times, is it not? And now what is he doing? He's speaking boldly. He is standing up. So an example before them and before the others. What kind of an example maybe we're setting before others? They're setting an example of these things. What about us? Okay. Have you ever been around? I know I've heard Tom say, be quiet. Here's the preacher. Any Christian should have the same when people are around. This is a Christian. Behave yourselves. Well, I think this is an example that they were setting. These are individuals that were servants of Christ. Behave yourself.
At the same time, with the idea of the boldness, that's also something that Peter and others would have learned from Jesus, because Jesus spoke boldly.
That's right.
And when I think Peter denied the Lord, there's still some reservations evidently in his head about all these things. But after he sees the Lord go through all of this without saying anything, without any resistance, that's a tremendous amount of courage to be able to do something of that nature. And look what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what you're seeing when it tells us that he went out and wept bitterly. That comes to his mind, and I think that changed his disposition. That event where the Lord looked upon him at the time of the cock crowing, and I think that had a lot to do with how he changed his whole approach to doing things.
Okay. Along the same line, I had the idea that you remember when Jesus was being examined there in Luke, the 19th chapter, there in verse 40. Said if we're quiet and have to just completely quiet and don't say anything, what do you say? You remember? So I tell you that if these should hold their peace, even the rocks would cry out. The concept here of we can't be quiet. We've got to tell these things to others as well. I think this is the thing that we need to keep in mind as well. What if we were timid and said, well, I'm afraid to say anything? Was this the attitude that they had here? There used to be, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but there used to be a saying, if you were on trial for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Is there enough evidence? And I think this is the idea here as well. There's enough evidence to convict. Yes, they are Christians. Their boldness, their willingness to stand, their courage should give us the same example, does it not? Or should. We shouldn't be afraid to speak the truth. All right? Because what did he say? Be ready how often? Always to be ready to answer our questions concerning Christ. Okay. All righty. Any questions? All right. Let's notice there in verse 14. And something else that's quite interesting here. And seeing this man that was healed standing with them, what? I love that. They could say nothing. You've heard the expression, there was no other words to say. This is just, kind of like the expression there. What do you do? You can't say yay, you can't say nay. That's wrong. Either one of those wrong. You're between a rock and a hard place.
Well, they couldn't deny what was a good play. And they couldn't deny the testimony of a fellow that had been healed because he knew who it was responsible for having done it. And now that would pit them against something that was an obvious truth, even to those people who also knew who was responsible for bringing it all about. So now they have to consider this as their next on the line. And the perception is if we're going to just stand against something of this nature, which is so obvious to everybody else, that makes us look like we get
no. So it's quite an embarrassing situation, is it not? Yes. And we can they couldn't really give an answer.
Just there again, there's another part of it. It's just like things that you see nowadays too, when they're obvious truth, but you've already got a predisposed idea about what it should be and what you think it ought to be. You're going to oppose it anyway, because if they're going to be received as being the ones responsible for this and having the power of God behind them, it means that we're not, and that's going to reduce people's view of us. So we've got to find some way to undermine them, regardless of what they've done. We're not going to say anything now, but we'll figure it out.
No.
But somehow or other, we got to do it.
That's quite true. And keep remembering who else was there. There's the Sadducees, as well as the Pharisees, as well as the high priest, as well as all these individuals. So there would be a conflict there, was not, as far as talking about the resurrection. A little conflict there. So this is quite interesting here. Seeing this man, what else can we say? We have to keep our mouths shut because we can't deny it. Not only that, look at verse 15. But when they had commanded them to go aside or go out of the council or go away from them, out of the council, they conferred among themselves. I'd like to be the fly on the wall here. What are we going to do? What can you say? What questions? How can we punish them? What accusations can we bring against them that would justify being punished? Quite a situation they've gotten themselves into, isn't it? And I think about that, and without any hesitation, Peter and John, they spoke boldly. These individuals, their mouths were shut. End of discussion. Okay.
You try to look at it from a different standpoint. If they were to take a different stance in this situation and had rejoiced with that man who had been healed, and they simply, Peter, we need to sit down and listen to you. Mm-hmm. And been convinced more of the truth, they might have had a greater response with the people than what they already perceived as how this is going to come out. And it would just been interesting to know exactly how that might have happened at that taking place. They'd taken that position and stood behind Peter and John, and we can't deny it. It is what it is. This is the power of God. We need to sit down and listen to these men. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there was a great debate that was going on here, and like I said, what can you say? Okay, and notice there in verse 16, what shall we do with these men? Notice something else. For what indeed, indeed a noble miracle has been brought, and they've done this. It's manifest. In other words, it's well known. It's can you imagine all these individuals that were there in the temple? Was there some 2,000 that had responded to the invitation that Peter and John, as far as being baptized or becoming Christians, or at least that many anyway, or somewhere around that. And now all these individuals are there. And he said, there's this stir all the way around in Jerusalem. And notice that we cannot do what? Deny it. It's back to what we said earlier. What can you say? Notice something else. But, verse 17, but that it spread no further. Here they brought into these individuals, what are we going to do? I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll just reprimand them. You know, sometimes whenever we get in trouble, a good reprimand, we kind of say, okay, well, maybe I made a mistake. Create a little bit of doubt in our minds or something like that, or scare you. This is a scare tactic because they couldn't find anything else wrong with them. They couldn't deny these things. So here's what we'd call a scare tactic. But let's go over here and tell them you cannot preach anymore. You got to keep your mouth shut. And let's threaten them that they henceforth tell no more nobody about these things. It gets back to what we said earlier in Luke 19. They couldn't keep their mouth shut.
It's still remarkable to me that they speak of Peter and John as being idiots. And this is a clear demonstration of idiocy. Because if you look in the text there, what are we going to do? We know it's a miracle been done, but note the phrase, it's manifest to all them that dwell in Jerusalem. That's the reason why we can't deny it. But then they turn right around. The key word, verse 17, but they've already given you an indication.
That's right.
But we don't want it to spread any further among the people. There is idiocy.
Yeah.
How are they going to keep that from happening when everybody already in the whole city knows what's going on and what's happening?
Okay.
And you know they're not going to be able to shut that up unless you're going to persecute people that know all this and go out and tell them. Well, if they're going to do that, now then they got people going to turn against them for that too. So they're in a lose-lose situation here. And their only way of coming out of this is just pure idiocy. And but that's not unusual. I mean, people find
politics.
Go ahead.
I said that's politics.
It's a politics. and not about that. But these individuals have become heartless, were they not? They had to deny it, but yet, like I said, if they denied it publicly, what would the people say? If they accepted it, what would the people say? If you accept it, why don't you accept it? If you deny it, then the people will rise up against you. It's just, like I said, it's hypocrisy here, as far as they're in a situation here.
Here you got the facts that are presented, and then you got people over here that don't want that fact to be known or presented. They don't want people to know the facts, and so they're going to come over here to find somebody that's going to listen to them and say, this is actually the way it was, when the facts are totally different from that. Trying to skew the entire set of circumstances so people will believe what they want them to do.
Yeah.
Rather than just accept things as it clearly is.
Well, had this not been a problem, had this not been a problem also earlier as far as Jesus was concerned? They couldn't deny the miracles that those that were blind, those that were leprosy, or those with the different incurable diseases, we might say. They couldn't deny these things, but they wasn't willing to accept them as well. And they were thinking also the idea of, well, if it's just, maybe it's a temporary thing. You know, after a little while, maybe it'd kind of fizzle out. People have that idea as well. It's kind of like the old adage, you know, bury our heads in the sand. Of course, found out the other day, dear, watching one of the documentaries, oysters don't bury their heads in the sand. Don't know where that came from, but anyway. Regardless, the idea of trying to hide and then make it will go away. But it won't go away. It didn't go away. And it's still alive today. And this is why, to me, their boldness encourages us to be as bold as well. Okay? Any questions?
I don't know what this fellow was. I can't remember now where it was. They were showing it on TV the other day. He was preaching something from this gospel out on the street, people on the street preaching. And there's one of these fellows that trains evidently takes exception to this fellow preaching. Walks right up to him with a pistol and puts it to his head. Of course, now he's got everybody else around him, so he's hesitant to do anything about it, but he uses this as a form of threat to try to get this man to shut up. But instead of pulling the trigger or anything, he just puts it back up and walks off. The fellow says, God bless you. You know, yeah, and it just, that's just insult to his own ignorance and injury. Is kind of sad situation, but it shows that at least he was not, he's kind of like Peter and John in this situation, that at least he didn't respond in the same fashion, but showed love toward the fellow that was threatening him. It just takes I don't know, the force of what it was he was trying to do, just kind of removed it.
Mm-hmm.
That puts all the onus of that situation on the one that.
That's right. Well, I think this is kind of like this right here. They were quite a problem here. They just couldn't answer. And like I said, they had to be heartless because even though with all this evidence there, they just did not want to accept it. And that's sad a lot of times. Even today, whenever people hear the gospel, well, that's not the way I want it, or that's not the way that I desire it, or that's not the way that I was taught as a child, or something along that line. Accept what man says instead of what God says. And it's sad that we have that attitude. We should be open-minded whenever it comes to what God says, do it. He didn't say, if you want, well, he did say if you want to, but I'm saying as far as our soul salvation, it is, we better do it. It's our choice. Okay. All right, question. Notice the next verse. Here they've decided all these things. Let's threaten them. Let's do this. Verse 18. And they call them and charge them not to speak at all, nor teach in the name of Jesus. Well, and I like a little bit later on in chapter 5, there, I think about verse, what is it, verse 28? 28. What does it say? That's it. That's it. Who are we going to listen to? Who has the authority to stop this? Did they have the authority to say, well, we changed our mind. We don't want you to say anything. We have the authority to do this. Did they have that authority? No. Who are we going to obey? Which one counts, as the expression is? Of course, God is. All righty. Any questions? Okay. Let's notice our next verse there. But Peter and John, now here's is after they're reprimanded, all these things. But Peter and John answered and said unto them, whether it be right in the sight of God to hearken unto you rather than unto God, you judge. Now he's taking it from them being accused and putting it back in their lap. The ball's in their part now. Well, you judge. Well, what about that? How can they say that?
Well, if they're doing this in a public way, it's not working out real good, but evidently, even if it's not, it's going to be something everybody's in learning about anyway. But yeah, when you got a dilemma which you're having to deal with, and you're on the wrong side of the circumstances, and you're trying to tell somebody else, you just need to. We're basically forcing you to take our position right here. You're not to speak or anything of this, but using our language. Well, since you put it that way, fellas, if it's right or wrong to listen to God or to listen to you, and we're supposed to make a decision upon that, what do you think we ought to do? And it's the same situation that Joshua placed before the people of Israel in Joshua 1:4. And if you make up your mind, if you want to serve the God of the Amorites, or the Ammonites were in the land you dwell, or the God that the father served way back to the days of Peter and all that, but I'll tell you what my choice is. And that's essentially the very same thing Peter and John is doing on this occasion. That's what really comes from that verse.
That's it. And notice in verse 20, carry along with the same idea. For we cannot but speak the things which we have what? Saw or seen and heard. American Standard said saw. But what they could, these were individuals who were a witness to these things. What does it mean to be an eyewitness? You called into court and they said, are you an eyewitness to this? Yes, I'm an eyewitness. What does that mean to you or to the people? Saw, exactly. You can testify to these things, whether this is true or that's true, or that's false or whatever. Peter and John had seen Christ risen from the dead. They had heard him preach. They had been with him for this period of time, several, 50 days? Something like that. Sir? And ascend into heaven. All these things are transpiring. They were witness. They would testify to these things. I think
directly relating to the fact that they had seen him heal, raise the dead, all those things. And even though they're telling Peter and John not to speak these things, we can't speak to just things that we've seen and heard. Now, if you think this is going to stop the message, you can tell us that. But what about all the city of Jerusalem who are you going to shut them up too? So the whole thing doesn't make any sense from the leader's standpoint.
well, I said they can't test. Excuse me.
As much as anything, they're trying to cut the head off the snake so that more of this doesn't happen.
That's true.
And that didn't work for Jesus, is it? Because they thought that was going to happen by crucifying him. And that only exacerbated the situation.
Okay.
And especially when the tomb was empty, that even made it work.
Right. And even the soldiers, you just keep your mouth shut. We'll take care of this for you. What was the consequences if they were guards and these things transpired and they stole the body? What was required of them? Their life, was it not?
But see, we have a tendency just to look at this through a single little lens right here where Jesus was resurrected. But you had other saints that were resurrected and were walking around the city.
That's exactly
so now
it.
I got to try to explain that. This is not something that was a hoax. It's not a fluke. This is the only explanation would have been the power of God, and the Lord had to be behind it. And when you're faced with something that is clearly manifest to everybody else, and then you want to deny it, you can't call somebody else.
Well,
it just doesn't go over very well.
you sure can't fight against God. There's no other way but His way. All right. I believe our time's come and gone. Are there any questions we need to discuss? Let's pick up then with verse 21. Lord willing, and we'll continue our study here. It's quite interesting. These poor folks, they just didn't know which way to turn. They were lost of words. All right. Thank you.
Dad, Bob and Junior needs some help getting in.
Okay.